Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Futurist Society. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Awesome. And today we're going to be talking in the present, but talking about the future with a really interesting person, Guru Banavar, who's a leader in both artificial intelligence and kind of the intersection between biology and how those two intermingle. He's a chief technical officer at Viome, and I'm really excited to have him. So Guru, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're doing at Viome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here, Dr. Awesome, which is a lovely name. And I am, like you said, the Chief Technology Officer at Viome, one of the founding members of Viome. And, you know, in Viome, we believe basically that in order to solve one of the most complex problems in the 21st century, which is chronic disease, you know, every other person you know has some kind of a chronic disease, right? In order to solve that, you really need to get to the bottom of the biology of human beings. And the biology of human beings includes not only the human molecular processes that go on in your body, but also the microbial processes that go on in your body. You know, every human is a kind of a walking ecosystem, as you know, right? And so there's a lot of microbes. In fact, for every human gene you have in your body, you have more than 100 microbial genes in your body. So understanding the interplay between your human genes and your microbial genes, and, you know, the microbial genes being super, you know, influenced and in fact controlled by the environment and the lifestyle that you practice every single day, right? Understanding that biology and then using that biology to get to the bottom of chronic diseases, you know, everything, you know, like you mentioned oral microbiome earlier. So, you know, there is the oral microbiome, there's the gut microbiome, there's the skin microbiome, there's, you know, microbiomes all over your body. So understanding the whole system, you know, we think of it as a systems biology type of an approach. And the way to understand it, we think, is to convert as much of that as possible into data, right? From the molecules to the bits and bytes. And once you convert that into the bits and bytes, you possibly cannot understand that, you know, just with the human brain, right? Because the amount of data is so much and the complexity of all the interactions is so much that you have to bring in the most advanced AI techniques to really understand that data. So that's where this connection between biology and AI happens. And my job is to basically look at the massive amounts of data that we generate from the molecular biology of humans and figure out what are the underlying molecular processes for many of the chronic diseases. And here, you know, when we say chronic disease, we are not just talking about one thing or two things. We're talking about, you know, systemic chronic diseases. You know, there's metabolic diseases, there are immune, diseases, there are cardiovascular, neurological, there's oral diseases. All of these things are actually interrelated. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the large amounts of data, we look at what kinds of clinical implications there are, lifestyle implications there are, and we give a number of our customers. You know, we have more than 600,000 customers around the world from 100 countries around the world right now. And so we give customers insights into what's going on in their biology based on this AI analysis of the molecular data. And based on that, we also give them recommendations. And we say, hey, look, these are the kinds of lifestyle changes that may make a difference for you versus you versus you, right? So it's very, very precise and personal for each individual that we talk to. And so AI is in the middle of all of this. We do all kinds of different machine learning on the molecular data. We do all kinds of different AI algorithms to bring that insight to the widest possible audience. And so, you know, I got to say, this is, you know, from a technologist perspective, this is a very exciting agenda, but also from a sort of a humanity perspective, this is what I think we need to do to take, I would call it, medicine, general, lifestyle medicine, so to speak, to the next level, because that's the only way that we can address chronic disease, which I believe is, one of the biggest problems in the 21st century. The same as, I don't know, climate change and, space exploration, all of those things. Chronic disease is one of those super important problems for humanity. So that's what I spend all my time thinking about.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really, really interesting, because I would argue that we have a lot of information about individual little subsections of biology. Like,
Yep.
I know a lot about a particular bacteria, right? But there's so many bacteria in our body and how they interact with each other. We're still, I feel like, on just the baby steps in regards to how we're putting it all together. So what are some insights that you found from some of this stuff? Like, if I were to sign up as a customer, what would be some insights that you would tell me? Like, we're both of South Asian background. I know that there's particular metabolic diseases that are very common in our background. So what would be some insights that maybe I would get if I were to sign up for Viome?
So yeah, there's actually a lot of insights you get, but let me start with some of the basic ones, and then we can work down depending on what you're interested in. Okay. So first of all, there is the notion of gut health, right? And gut health has been interpreted in many, many ways, right? And gut health is connected to everything, starting from metabolic disease and cardiovascular disease. You and I, as you said, right, are from a similar sort of geographical background. But it turns out that, the geographical background has a certain amount of, commonality, but our lifestyle backgrounds probably have a much bigger influence on our everyday, biological processes. Let me give you a few examples, okay? When you think about inflammation in the gut, right? So that's a very big component of gut health. So there are these, inflammatory processes going on in your gut. Comes usually from a lot of microbial triggers. We think about bacteria, but it's not just bacteria. There's bacteria, there's fungi, there's archaea, there's viruses, there's all kinds of different microbes in your gut. And they all have a lot of their genes, but they're expressing very different types of genes or transcripts, like, RNA molecules, based on what you eat, for example. So everything you eat is first consumed by your microbiome. And so based on, whether you eat too much protein, or whether you eat too much sugars, or whether you eat too much, complex carbohydrates like fibers and stuff like that, right? There is a difference in how the microbes consume that food that you consumed, and then produce both inflammatory and anti-inflammatory molecules. So for example, many bacteria have a molecule called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, which is a very well-known inflammatory molecule, right? So if there's a lot of LPS that is produced, then your gut can get inflamed. And when you're inflamed, there's a lot of bad things that are going on. There's all of the, immune system, cytokines, stuff like that are passing around. There's a lot of blood flowing. There's a lot of repair happening. There's a lot of immune system activation that's happening, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, there are certain microbes, and I'll just call microbes rather than bacteria, because I'm including bacteria, viruses, fungi, et cetera, et cetera. All of the microbes in your gut can be producing anti-inflammatory molecules. And, the most common anti-inflammatory molecules that people may have heard of are short-chain fatty acids, right? Like butyrate, propionate, and so on and so forth. So there's this sort of war going on between the inflammation and the anti-inflammatory molecules in your gut. So what if I told you that on balance, right, this is the amount of inflammatory activity going on in your gut, and this is the amount of anti-inflammatory activity that's going on in your gut, and these two things are interacting with each other, and overall, your gut health seems to be okay, because the anti-inflammatory molecules are in fact fighting off the inflammatory processes well enough to be able to not get you into crazy diseases like inflammatory bowel disease or something like that, right? But on the other hand, I might tell you that, listen, the inflammatory processes are winning out on the anti-inflammatory stuff. So unless you change something, you will not be able to balance out the inflammatory and anti-inflammatory sort of fight war that's going on in your gut. That is all encapsulated in this idea of gut health. Okay, and in fact, we not only tell you that your gut health, we actually do it on a scale of 0 to 100. So we can say, the higher the better. Okay, if your score is like 70 or something like that, you're in really good shape compared to the general population. And if your score is, let's say, in the 20s or 30s or something, you're not in very good shape. Okay, so I could tell you where your inflammatory, processes are on that scale. And when I say gut health is so on and so forth, you can say, all right, if my score is in the 20s, maybe I really should take my food habits a little more seriously. And maybe I should change my food habits to be more anti-inflammatory friendly so that I can bring my gut health score up into a good zone. And and then we give you some recommendations. We say, hey, listen, you may want to have these kinds of food items that have more complex carbohydrates specific to the kinds of bacteria that we see are actually microbes in your gut that can help your anti-inflammatory process. So we actually give you recommendations and say you can have these. And if you want, we can even send you precisely formulated supplements to your home, so you can supplement your food. I mean, I'm not saying that you will replace your food with the supplements, but you can have only so much complex carbohydrates, right? So if you want to add more, or if you want to change some metabolites like butyrate, for example, or whatever, we can send you those after looking at your gut activities, and then you can decide whether or not you want to do that, right? So all of that information is encapsulated in this one idea called gut health, right? And we not only do gut health, we do oral health, for example. We have a separate score called oral health. And there we can tell, I mean, you have a background in oral health, so I can tell you about, the inflammatory processes that are going on in your mouth, right? The gum inflammation, what exactly is happening in your mouth? Is it really breaking down the gum, teeth barriers and causing caries or, periodontitis or, any kind of maybe even some pre-malignancies or, whatever is happening in your mouth? I can actually see all of that activity in your mouth, put it all together in another score called oral health, and tell you where your oral health is. And by the way, if you're really interested, if you're a geek like me, you can say, okay, it's not enough for me to know just how my oral health is doing. I want to see what exactly are the processes. We break it down and we say, okay, if your oral health is bad, is it your gum health that is bad? Is your, tooth health that is bad? Is it your breath that is bad? Are the volatile sulfur compounds, too much? There's a lot of hydrogen sulfide being produced, for example, or is there a lot of acidity in your mouth, right? Or is there, a variety of different, all the way to cancer processes, right? We look at, all the cancer processes like genotoxic and fungal activity and so on. We break down all of those things and we give you information about everything that's going on in your mouth, right? So we do that for all the major parts of your body, your oral health, your gut health, your inflammatory health or immune health, so to speak, or your heart and cardiovascular health, your kidney health, and so forth. So we have a few of these scores that we tell you about. And based on that, you can decide what else you want to do. You can go, do some more research on your own. You can change your lifestyle. You can talk to your doctor. You can do a variety of things based on that information.
Yeah. So are you setting in saliva samples, or what is the nuts and bolts of this whole process?
Yeah. So, if you are interested in Viome, you would just go to our website, and we have a number of different kits, right? So there's one kit called the Full Body Intelligence, which is our sort of flagship product. And the Full Body Intelligence gets you, like when you purchase it, it arrives in your home in one box, but it has 3 samples in it. There is a saliva sample. There is a very simple finger prick blood sample, and there's a stool sample. So the stool sample gives us information about your gut health. The saliva sample gives us information about your oral health, and the blood sample gives us information about your overall, system. Kind of think of it as, if you look at the alimentary canal as starting from the mouth to the other end, right? So the top of the tube, the bottom of the tube, and around the tube, right? So the whole system is what we get through the 3 samples. And then we put all of that data together into all of these scores that I was talking about. And those scores then drive all the recommendations. So there's actually a ton of science behind this that we keep publishing about. And every time we have enough, insights from these molecular processes from these 3 samples, especially in the large populations that we deal with, we put together a scientific publication and publish it in one of the usual journals that the science community looks at. So if somebody's interested in looking at those journals and the scientific publications, you're welcome to go do that. We also do randomized clinical trials and figure out, what are the differences between people who follow these recommendations versus people who don't follow the recommendations, and so on and so forth. And we've shown some really good results about how it changes your overall molecular health, so to speak.
So that's really interesting. What were the results specifically from the randomized clinical trial? Because I know that that's kind of the gold standard for evaluating an effectiveness of treatment. So what did you guys find in that?
So the latest one that we've done is a metabolic health randomized clinical trial. So just to break it down a little bit for the audience here, right? So we have 2 arms, and there's one arm that's receiving placebos. We give them these supplement pills that are, basically inert, right? There's just water in them. And then there's another arm that gets the precise, molecular data-based recommendations and converted into these micronutrients and macronutrients that we think are appropriate for that particular individual. So those are the 2 arms of the study. And we randomize, all the people who we recruit into the study into one of those 2 arms. And what we found, and this study is still not fully completed, but we just did an interim analysis. And in the interim analysis, we see that the endpoints that we looked at, right? In this case, the endpoints were the diabetes endpoints, right? Like HbA1c and, other markers around like insulin resistance and so on. And we're also looking at several other markers as secondary endpoints, including some clinically validated questionnaires and so forth. So all of those are going in the right direction. So there's a statistically significant difference between, even in the interim analysis, between the intervention arm and the placebo control arm. Already we've seen that, and we want to just finish that in the next few months, and we'll publish the result. In fact, we are starting to put together the results already based on the interim analysis. So that is our latest study. We've also done several, think of it as retrospective observational analyses on very large populations, right? And the reason it's very large populations is because we have, like I said, 600,000 or so customers around the world. So we can retrospectively look at all the people who had disease X, whatever the disease is, versus people who did not have disease X, because we get that information from that population. And we can see retrospectively, we can do the analysis and say, what were the differences between people who followed our recommendations, people who did not. And we've published a few studies. One of the papers that we submitted, we published recently is in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. And you'll see there that we had, and this is the retrospective studies. And, that one was a single arm study. So that was kind of preliminary results. The new RCT that I mentioned is still not out there, but it will be out there shortly. But in the previous paper, we were looking at IBS endpoints, which is, irritable bowel syndrome, measured through a clinically validated questionnaire called the IBS Symptom Severity Score, which tells you, what is the level of IBS symptoms you have on a scale of 0 to 500 and so on, right? So that was one. And then we did a depression analysis on a PHQ-9 scale over a period of, I think it was around 9 months or so of intervention. And then we did anxiety scores and so on. So that paper is published in American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. You can see that, again, the markers, the endpoints that we were looking at were better in the intervention arm, or in the arm that had taken these precision supplements that I'm talking about, versus the arm that did not take the precision supplements. So we've done the retrospective, we've done now the prospective, which will be published shortly. And we've done many other studies, which I write a research blog, by the way. So I welcome your readers to look at the blog that we write, where we put out these kinds of results as we find them in our population. And, we try to make it accessible to the broad population and say, what are the real, takeaways from each one of these analyses and so on. So there's a number of these kinds of results out there right now.
Mm-hmm. I agree that there's a lot of promise from all the things that you're talking about, but just from like your own personal experience, have you tried it? Have you done it yourself? What were some insights that you got, and how do you feel?
Yeah,
Just your own personal experience.
Yeah. So, so you have to, again, each person's experience, changes, right? In my case,
sure.
I did have a major problem with my oral health.
Yeah.
And the reason I ended up in that problem space is because I skipped going to the dentist during COVID. For almost 2 years. I was too worried about going to the dentist and, getting COVID. And so I actually avoided COVID for the first 2 years. And I was maybe being too careful or whatever. But at the end of the COVID season, I realized that my oral health was terrible. And, the biggest problem I had was that my oral health had gone in the direction of periodontitis.
Yeah, which is very common within our demographic. For whatever reason, we're more predisposed to it. And, I think that's something that I would advise all South Asians is to go see your dentist on a regular basis, because it can happen like that,
And it did in my case. I definitely did in my case. So I was kind of shocked to see how bad it was. And that was about a year ago. Or maybe a little more than a year ago, about 18 months ago, I realized that I had really terrible oral health after the whole COVID episode happened. And of course, I was already focused on my gut health because I knew what was going on and all that stuff. But oral health, I'd kind of neglected it, I believe. And so I started actually addressing it with some of the recommendations that we provide to our customers. In Viome. So we have these lozenges, and we have a toothpaste also that we are personalizing, with a whole bunch of different ingredients that come from, all of the known current science, right?
So is this like beneficial bacteria, or is it like, what is it that you're putting into these products?
Probiotics and postbiotics. We're taking a base and we are adding probiotics and postbiotics into the toothpaste, and we are doing the same thing with lozenges that you can just pop in your mouth. And this is a new product, and we've been actually experimenting with it and building it over the last year or so. And so I get, of course, early access to all of these things, and I've been trying it, and I got to tell you, I feel so much better now. Actually, the last time I went to the dentist, which was about a month ago, I see that there is a major improvement in my oral health.
That's great.
And hopefully, I don't know whether it'll happen that way or not, but I'm hoping that I can actually take the periodontitis backwards, right? To reverse it and get my gums back to where they were and my teeth back to where they were and so forth. So that's my current story about how this can make a difference. But if you go to our website and look at the stories of all our customers who have had gut issues, many of them have these abdominal pain type issues, and people have skin issues and so forth. So a lot of them talk about what the issues that were resolved. But of course, there's the studies as well, right? So there's all of the above that's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not only your company. I think from a broader perspective, this kind of inward journey that we're going on as a species, like people are getting these full body scans, a lot more interest in lifestyle medicine is cropping up. That you have these people like David Attia or Peter Attia, excuse me, and all these people that are really publishing and promoting it. I think that the technology is still catching up with all of the interest, in my opinion. I think that we have a lot of sensor technology, but just like you said, there's just not enough people to process all the data that we already have, right? And
Yeah,
science, especially academic science, is so particularly focused on individual things, and it's tough to see the whole picture and to evaluate all of the things interacting with each other. So I'm really hopefully optimistic about all the different technological breakthroughs that are going to happen because of the advanced computational power of AI. But
absolutely.
specifically the oral microbiome, which is kind of like my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
there's so much interest in that. You know, here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there's like 70 different companies that are like focusing on the oral microbiome, and they want to do it as, you know, almost like an advanced sensor type of situation. Whereas instead of doing blood tests, like we spit into a cup and then they give us like a breakdown of our health.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's realistic? I mean, based on what you've seen, you know, you're kind of in the thick of it. Do you think that that's a realistic endpoint for us?
Well, I mean, I absolutely think so. Yes. So let me tell you about the NIH proposal that we just submitted.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, with the Foresight people in Boston, since you mentioned those guys, and multiple other centers around the country. So what we are looking at now is a way to, start with one of the most deadly diseases that happen in your mouth, okay, which is oral cancer or throat cancer, right? Turns out that, it's actually increasing in
Yeah,
the last few years, unfortunately, right? It's
yeah,
increasing because of all of the, lifestyle things that people, have, HPV infections increasing,
right.
vaping has been increasing even among young people, and so on and so forth. So there's been a lot more really, bad outcomes from all of these
Yeah.
lifestyle
Still
practices. So
and it's still super deadly, you know, that people
yeah,
don't realize that it has a 50% mortality rate. Like, but
yes. And
that hasn't changed for decades.
it hasn't changed for decades. And the primary driver of the 50% mortality is because it's caught at a late stage, right?
Right.
You don't see that at the early stages and do something about it. And it
Yeah.
can develop over a decade or more, right? After all of these things. So the whole name of the game is early detection, and
Yep.
don't depend on somebody looking at it through the human eyes and figuring out that something is turning malignant or something like that. Try to catch it at the molecular level as early as possible, and
Mm-hmm.
then figure out how to change habits or change or do whatever medical interventions you can do, whether it's, nipping off something that is early, or, anything that we can do, right? So going back to our NIH proposal, we have already developed in Viome a first generation oral and throat cancer test. And it's a laboratory developed test that's available right now, through dentists and so on. So what we're now doing is, so we got an FDA breakthrough designation for that test, the oral and throat cancer test. That's based on saliva. It's based on the microbiome of your mouth and the interaction with the host gene expression. So again, gene expression is what we do, right? We don't do DNA in Viome, we do RNA. And the reason why we think RNA is important is because you're the same person, in the beginning you may be healthy, later you may be sick, your DNA did not change, your RNA actually changed. So we want to track RNA, not your DNA, because your DNA doesn't give us a lot of information about, what's changing in your body.
Right.
So anyway, so based on that, we developed that first generation oral throat cancer test. And now, after getting the FDA breakthrough designation for that test, we are doing a pivotal study, which is like a phase 3 type of study, clinical trial. And so we now have created a little consortium of many researchers, including all of the institutes I mentioned earlier. And we are going to create what I think should be the standard of care for oral and throat cancer. And I think every dentist, every hygienist, every oral health professional should be using this, just like they use a blood test for a cardiovascular, exam. So you walk into a dentist's office, you should be getting your saliva tested. And it's now been shown. I mean, we have multiple papers on this. The latest paper we wrote was in the Journal of Oral Oncology. where we showed what our FDA breakthrough designation results were and what the biomarkers were, the microbiome-based biomarkers and the host markers, and what the clinical outcomes were that we submitted to the FDA, right? So that's the extreme, part of what can happen if you don't take care of your oral health, right? But work backwards from there, right? Even before the malignancy happens, there's a lot of different kinds of pre-malignancies that are becoming more and more prevalent. So, for example, these white patches in your mouth, the leukoplakias and the dysplasias and so forth, that's now hit like 2.6, almost, close to 3% of the population have these issues in their mouth.
I see them all the time. Yeah.
You see them all the time. I'm sure you do.
They
And
come
then
to me to get a biopsy, it's because like
Yeah.
I'm the surgeon that cuts it out. And I feel like the morbidity associated with that procedure is unnecessary. It would be great to have some sort of test that I could do that I didn't have to, fillet open somebody's tongue to figure out if this is cancerous or not.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
literally just yesterday, I had this guy come in with on his tongue, and the tongue is a huge muscle, right? So you cut into it, and he's going to be sore for days. You can't take a day off from using your tongue. You still got to talk. You still got to eat. Still got to do all these things that are necessary for the activities of daily life.
Yeah.
And if I could just test that through saliva, that would be huge. So that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in speaking with you, because oral cancer is a real problem. It is getting worse. I don't think it's talked about enough. But I think more importantly is that I just don't think we've tapped into the potential of the oral microbiome. I think that
Absolutely.
systemically, like we can talk about, like the really focused stuff in the mouth, but systemically, I don't think that we've made enough connections between how healthy our mouth is and how healthy the rest of our body is.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was just working backwards from the cancer to the pre-cancer to the inflammatory diseases like periodontitis, caries, and so on. And then you start looking at the connection between oral health and systemic health. And we just submitted a paper. It's available right now on bioRxiv, where we show the 8 most important molecular pathways in your mouth, 8 of them, and the connections between those 8 pathways and systemic health, all the way to, cardiovascular health and neurological health, right? So, we have a lot of research, and I'm going to start writing more blogs on this topic about each of these connections between oral health and other systemic health aspects. And I would love to, work with you on this, or get your feedback on it at least, and see if this
I would love to
corresponds to what you're seeing in your own practice and so on. But our science is basically showing that the for example, the oral inflammatory pathway is connected to not only the usual oral health issues like periodontitis and all of that, but type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? There's a connection between your oral inflammation and your metabolic health. And I'm not quoting somebody else here. I'm telling you, this is primary data from our own molecular analysis.
So do you think it's correlation, not causation, though? Because I feel like personally, I don't think that there's been a smoking gun yet for some of these systemic health. And I think that there is. And that's coming from somebody who's a believer like you are. Like, I really think that there is some sort of connection, and we just haven't defined it yet. We haven't proven it yet.
So look, at this point in time, it is, the causation is not yet established. Let me be super clear about it. Yeah. But I think we have a shot at it with the data we have in Viome. So we're heading in that direction. So currently, we are only seeing that there's a correlation happening, and if you look at the underlying molecular processes, right? So let me give you an example by what I mean, right? So if you say that, Porphyromonas gingivalis, which everybody thinks of as a bad microbe bacteria in your mouth, it turns out, by the way, that 80% of the people have Porphyromonas gingivalis, P. gingivalis, in their mouth in America. And that's true in our population as well, 78% plus. Now, it turns out only about 15% of them are expressing the toxins, the virulent toxins that are in fact associated with all of these diseases we think about, like the gingipain gene, which is part of the P. gingivalis genome, that's only expressed by about 15%, not 80% of the people. Right. So we track that because we are for metatranscriptomic technology, we can see what are the genes that are being expressed. So we see how many people have gingipain expressed, and then we can go the next step and say how many of those people have a leaky gum, right? So there's bleeding happening. So there's translocation of the gingipain from your oral cavity into your bloodstream, and the bloodstream then, takes your gingipain molecules, right? These are transcripts that can turn into these, these proteins that can cause havoc in your cardiovascular system or your metabolic system. So you can then track that and see, is that now being expressed in the, in the blood, right? And is that really connected to the metabolic issues, whether it's insulin resistance or it is some kind of, fat storage that's happening that causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? That whole path of causality, I think, could be analyzed using our data. For the first time, I believe, when you start looking at expression of the genes and you're looking at both the oral and the blood the blood molecules, you are able to actually trace what is going on in the connection. I've already seen the connection between the oral and the gut microbiome, but one of the next steps we want to do is the oral and the blood transcriptome and seeing what the connections are. So I believe we're getting there. And I think in the next couple of years, we have a really good shot at it because you need large enough data sets in order to be able to establish this kind of causality. But I think we'll get there. We have the resolution of the data and we have the scale of the data to be able to do this now.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the connection between the oral and the gut microbiome that you've identified? Because here's the thing that I see on a regular basis, a big clinical question that I have, right? Is that, I would argue that the biggest problem from an oral health perspective is edentulalism and panedentulalism or partial edentulalism, right? So you lose, the ability to chew with the back of your teeth, and then now you start self-selecting for softer foods. You start chewing like a rabbit. You're really not experiencing life the way that you did when you were younger, right? And that's really common. I mean, after the age of 40, the average American has lost about 7 teeth, right? And there's about 20% of people who are over 65 that just have no teeth whatsoever, no real teeth to chew with, right? And so exactly, like either they're dentures or they might have like a handful of teeth that that are in the front that aren't really functional, right? So those people come to me and they say, listen, like I want to have my smile back, and I do a big surgery and I restore that. And I'm telling you, Guru, their life changes, right? Like they become healthier, like they become, just different people from start to finish. And I see it not only with the older people, but the younger people that I take care of, the people who have really significant overbites or underbites, like they look like this and they can't chew either, right? And I do this big surgery and I give them the ability to chew again, the ability to function correctly again. And their life changes too, and I've always credited it as just a psychological thing. Okay. Like, like they look different and they feel different. And then now like they're making different lifestyle decision choices. But I've done it on people who don't really have that same kind of social burden. Like I had this one 91-year-old woman that, she's losing all of her teeth and she's like, I have to lose all my teeth, but I want to eat saltwater taffy. And I was like, well, like you're not going to be able to do that in dentures. So this is what, I can provide for you. And I gave that to her and she becomes healthier afterwards.
Wow.
Like I don't know why it's happening, but, I feel like I don't have access to the same kind of resources that you do, so, tell me a little bit more about that connection between the oral and gut connection, because maybe there's something there. It's something that's just been a burning question in the back of my head that I just see on a regular basis. Because, when people start declining from an oral health perspective, they see somebody like me. And so I see them before and after this transformation. And I'm telling you, there's something there. I haven't been able to to ask the right questions to get some sort of, lead on why it's happening.
So Imran, listen, I believe that we are in the beginning of this era of understanding that connection. And I can't tell you that we have all the answers yet, but I think we are able to now ask the right questions. And I can tell you some examples of the questions that we are beginning to ask, because these are the hypotheses based on which we are designing the scientific experiments. And we will keep publishing this as we find more information. Okay. So here's a few examples, right? One is, what is the connection between the oral microbiome and the gut microbiome is one of the fundamental questions, right? So I'll give you an example of something that's kind of been thrown around in the oral health, industry, and also in the gut health industry, but the connection between the two has never been established. So Fusobacterium nucleatum, right? Sort of like a famous bug, right? And you know that there's a lot of fuso in your mouth. Everybody has a lot of it. And then when you look at the gut, you see a little bit of it. Okay. And so is there a connection between the fuso in the mouth and in the gut? And if so, I mean, people have associated in the mouth, people have associated Fusobacterium nucleatum with inflammation and with periodontitis and all kinds of premalignancies. In the gut, it turns out fuso is responsible, apparently, like there's a hypothesis going on for colon polyps and all the way to colorectal cancer. So people have found Fusobacterium nucleatum in the tumor tissue of colorectal cancer.
Wow.
Okay. So the question is there a movement of Fusobacterium nucleatum from the mouth to the gut, right? And so, that's a question to ask and see whether, what kinds of lifestyles, what kinds of, acidity in your gastric system might cause this. So, one of the experiments we did was, we looked at people who are taking, antacids, right, in their mouth, and people who are not. Right? And ask the question, okay, what is the connection between the amount of Fusobacterium nucleatum in their mouth and in their gut in both cases? Turns out for people who are taking antacids, the amount of Fusobacterium is higher in the gut than people who are not, right? Because the acid is kind of, killing what's coming from the mouth. So, I mean, I think a typical person swallows something like 10 or 15 liters of saliva per day, right? And so there's a lot of things going on in your mouth that ends up going into your gut through the whole gastric system. And if your gastric system is acid, it's actually killing off things that are going in. But if it's not, then it lets it through, and there's gut health issues that can show up. So I'm just giving you one particular example of what might be happening here. But there's a lot of such things that we are beginning to see in the connection between the oral and the gut microbiome. And I want to start writing about these and showing the data for it and so on. So I mean, it's a long conversation, and there's probably a lot more science here that we can talk about and stuff like that. But I think it's the beginning of an era where we have the data to be able to first ask the right questions and then hopefully find the data-driven answers for this, rather than just somebody giving an opinion about it or whatever. So that's where we are.
I know, and the idea of going from like a hypothesis to actual causality is very, very difficult in academic medicine, and I understand like the limitations of kind of the resources that we have currently in 2024, right? Like it's something that we have to be realistic about. So I understand that, but it's really interesting to talk to you, because even just that idea of the oral to gut connection is not something that I really pondered up until you said it, and so that's really interesting. I think that one of the things that I do want to talk to you more about, and we can talk more offline and in the future, is just how do we expedite those hypotheses into maybe even like a research project or something like that, because
That's what
I
I'm
feel like,
interested in. That's
yeah,
that's definitely what I'm interested in. If we were to do a clinical study
yeah.
and we recruited people in these arms where, you did this intervention to improve their chewing teeth on one side, and there are certain people who have not yet done that intervention, and see what the differences are. Right? Or before after kind of a thing. If you want to do a single arm study, we could do a before after this intervention that you do, right?
Yeah.
Super interested in doing those kinds of things. Yes.
Yeah. No, we should talk more on offline about this, but super interesting. And what I'm really amazed by is that like your background is in computer science, and like you have so much knowledge about all these intricate systems. I'm really impressed with, how much you've been able to even teach me about in this.
No, I mean, hey, listen, I've picked up all of this science in the last maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8 years since we started Viome. I decided to. So yes, my background is in computer science and AI, and about a decade ago, right? I started looking at computational biology. How you apply AI in the world of biology, and to me, biology is an information science. It's an information science. Yes, it is a biological science, but it's actually, it's reached a level of complexity where it's become an information science. So you have to be able to apply the advanced algorithms to biology in order to be able to truly understand it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was the simple thing for me. And I said, what is the best way to do it? Let's jump, head first, right? And go into the depths of it. And I mean, it's amazing. I love the science part of it. I love the technology part of it and application of it. But now I'm seeing all the clinical implications and how we can take this to patients and to doctors and everything. And I hope, I basically said I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to this pursuit.
That's awesome, Guru. I really wish you all the best. I think that computation in general is like this commodity now that's going to explode in all the different fields because of the advent of artificial intelligence. And I really appreciate people like you that are doing it to stuff that like I feel like is a very niche topic, but just so important, right? Like the what I do on a daily basis, I don't think has the same kind of mass appeal as the cosmetic applications of medicine, or the longevity benefits of medicine, right? Like longevity is such a hot topic right now, but I do think that it's important that we kind of look inward and focus on some of these more underrepresented areas of science, and I really appreciate
actually, thank you. And I actually wanna say that this is not a niche topic anymore. I think that the reason it's not a niche topic is because chronic disease is affecting, I think, more than 50%, 70% of the population of the planet, right?
Absolutely.
I think literally everybody on this planet will, unless you're living in one of those really corner case blue zones and stuff like that, where your life is so good that you don't face chronic disease. If you're living in the industrialized world, which is like 80-90% of the population of the world, you are going to suffer chronic disease at some point in your life. And in order to address chronic disease, you have to do what we are trying to do. So to me, this is like one of the biggest topics that all of humanity should care about. And that's why I think we got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like and maybe I'm just jaded by like when I went to medical school and dental school and residency and all of these different things that I had to do, it was still in the sick care era of medicine. And so I still feel like the idea of like, preventative healthcare, lifestyle medicine, chronic conditions being treated before they become chronic, I still think of that as like relatively novel, even though I do feel like what you're saying is accurate. I mean, it is in the general public's consciousness now. Like my wife is talking to me more about this stuff than anybody else is. And so the point is that I'm just really happy to hear people like you that are doing this cutting edge work. But we are getting close to the end of our time, and like everybody that comes onto the podcast, I always ask 3 general questions to inspire other young scientists and other people who are interested in this field. of futurism and advancing technology. So specifically for me, I feel like the driver for a lot of what I do is from the motivation of science fiction and having like this utopian idea of what we are able to achieve. As you can see from my background, I really love
Yes,
science fiction,
great.
and I can't wait until we're able to live more productive lives through technology. What about yourself? What motivates you? For me, it's science fiction, but for you, it might be something different. What really motivates you in your off hours to do what you're doing?
Well, listen, I also spend a lot of time with science fiction and think about the future and so forth, and and the life that our kids are likely to, and that our grandkids are likely to face, even later in this century. And being in the world of AI, I think that we are evolving as a species to the point where we are going to create a new subspecies or species of Homo sapiens, which will be, in some sense, more integrated with silicon, right? So we are a carbon-based life form, and I think maybe some silicon-based, technologies will somehow be part of our lives. I mean, right now, my glasses, my ring, let alone my phone, right? These things are part of my life every day. It has the same impact on my life that pretty much any of my senses do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think a lot about how we are going to create a new type of species that is going to be a lot more capable in many ways, to solve kinds of the problems that I think will make us understand the universe better, right? That's how I think about the world, right? And
Yeah,
I
I
think
hope so. I think that,
AI is critical for that.
yeah, I hope so. I also look at it as, you know, I really look forward to the day where we are just optimized, right? Like every component of our life is optimized for being the best that we can be. Similar to like Star Trek, right? Like we're in
Absolutely.
a post-scarcity society. Everybody's healthy, it's geared towards being the best version of ourselves. And I think that that's something that AI is really going to help with. I look for.
And if I may add one more point, I think people are getting to live longer, and I want to make sure that we all live very healthy, high quality of life until the last day of our lives, right? And that drives me a lot.
Yeah.
And for myself, for our generation, for the next generations, and so on, I think that's where we're headed. And I think about it, and it drives my work.
That's awesome. So second question, specifically in regards to the convergence of AI and computational biology, where do you see this in 10 years? Do you think that this is going to become commonplace? Like, do you think this is going to become, much more significant in our lives? Like, what do you feel like the future is going to look like in 10 years for this particular area of science?
Yeah. So my hope, to be honest with you, is that our current healthcare system, which is so massive and so broken, is somehow disrupted through this
Mhm.
entire, new world of AI, computational biology, and so forth, where the way I think about it is that every individual has a ton of information, about themselves. And, the way I think about it is that every individual should have like a digital twin who is able to answer questions about every process that's going on in the body. And using that, they are able to take care of their own health much better than what we do today, which is to run to a doctor who has 5 minutes to talk to you about a few things and try to make a decision about it, and so on and so forth. So that system, with all of the middlemen, with all of the different entities in our healthcare system, with insurance and lab managers and blah, 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 the pharmaceutical benefit managers, and all of these people are just there for process purposes. They're not really adding a lot of value. I wish and I hope that in the next 10 years, we are able to disrupt that industry and we bring healthcare directly to the individual, where people can do it at home with full knowledge of themselves, and to take care of it by changing their lifestyle, changing their practice of, their everyday habits, and stop waiting until the big acute events happen, like a cardiovascular failure or, some diabetes that's acute. Let's not get to that point. Let's figure it out a lot sooner and make it stop, right? Or go backwards.
Yeah.
That's what I hope will happen in the next 10 years.
I agree. I think that would be really great. I think that the focus has been so much on treating some of these end stage complications of chronic issues, of lifestyle issues. And I look forward to the day where the end stage product is less and we're just living healthier lifestyles. That's what I'm looking forward to. So last question, the computational biology and artificial intelligence component is something that you've kind of really contributed to, that you're doing a lot of interesting things in. But outside of that, what really excites you about Futurist technologies? What excites you about things that you read in the paper that are science related, that are apart from your field of interest? Like for me, really, I really like robots, and I think that that's something that I can't wait until I have a butler robot that's able to wash my dishes for me and do my laundry for me. So, I'm always keeping up with what Tesla is doing with their humanoid robot and stuff like that. And it's just totally independent of my field. It doesn't really have anything to do with it, but it certainly is something that I'm really excited about. But what about you, Guru? What's something that, aside from your field, that you're really excited about?
Hey, I love space exploration. And I love flying, and I feel at home when I'm flying in the air. And, I kind of, follow everything that's going on in space technologies. And, I look forward to the day when we can get to Mars, for example. Yeah. And your background actually looks like we could be on any planet. I don't know which planet you have, but the water tells me that it's not Mars, something else. Right. Maybe this is some remote corner of our planet. But
just utopian vision.
But it's got 2 moons, so it's different. It's some other planet, right? So I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to do space exploration myself. But if I ever do in my lifetime, I would probably take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my kids will probably have a chance to do something in their lifetimes, if they really want to do it. So I love that. And it goes back to Star Trek and everything else that we grew up with. But it's becoming real.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's such a unifying vision. Like everybody's excited about it, right? Like that we're going to be going up back to the moon, and not potentially this year, most likely next year with the new NASA missions. And I think that's going to really be an awesome time for humanity. So I agree. I think that's like a really exciting piece of science that all of us are excited about. But honestly, thank you so much. It was really interesting talking with you, and I'd love to talk with you more. For all of those listeners who are interested in everything that Guru is doing, we're going to be having all of his information on our website and all of our social media, as always, as all of our guests come on. We really want to promote the interesting things that they're doing and helping build the future. And for all those of you guys who listen on a regular basis, thank you so much for supporting us. Please like and subscribe, as always. And as always, I will see you in the future. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.